We're going to continue learning a step further and completing the square on lesson 58. And I'm actually only going to do one example here because you know how to do completing the square and you should get the idea here after one problem. But it says solve 4x squared plus 3x minus 3, this quadratic equation equals 0, by completing the square. Now the difference here that we've had in our past ones is simply that we have a lead coefficient. We have a lead coefficient. And your lead coefficient is in front of the x squared. So we always want x squared by itself. So in order to do that, all we have to do is divide everything by 4. When we divide everything by 4, this crosses out. Sorry, I'll do it this way. So the 4's cross out there, and you are left with x squared, exactly how we want it. I'm actually going to write it over here so I have more room to work the problem. Plus 3/4 x minus 3/4 equals 0. And so now we have x squared by itself, and we can solve by completing the square. Well, if you remember completing the square, our first step was to always move the one that did not have an x value. So add 3/4. And we are left with x squared plus 3/4 x, leaving a blank spot, equals positive 3/4. Now from here, we took the coefficient of x. Coefficient of x is 3/4, and we divided that by 2. So when we divide by 2, okay, if I said divide by 2 this way, it's probably easier to see that way. That's the same as saying multiply by 1/2. Okay, these are the same. So 3/4 times 1/2 is 3/8. And I did forget to say this. Remember, we're trying to get to x plus a squared equals k. That's the equation we're trying to get to. Now, what we just did when we multiplied by 1/2 is we found a. So we already know a equals 3/8. But then we do our next step. We square our coefficient of x divided by 2. So we square 3/8. When you square 3/8, it looks like 3/8 times 3/8. And so you got to multiply the top. 3 times 3 is 9. 8 times 8, 64. So that is the number that we plug in here and here. Really, here is unnecessary. That's just showing you the process that you have to do it to both sides. But I'm going to go ahead and write plus 9/64 on the 3/4 side. Let me remove some of this clutter here. Let's look at 3/4 plus 9/64. And let's try to add that together. Let's see if 4 is divisible into 64 and if we can have a nice, easy common multiple. 64 is divisible by 4. I had to multiply. 64 divided by 4 is 16. Therefore, you would have to multiply by 16. 4 goes into 64 16 times. So now you're going to have 16 times 3, that's 48/64, plus 9/64. 48 plus 9 is 57. and hopefully you know why we were doing that whole process, otherwise this is kind of silly. That whole process was to find k. To find k. Now that we know k, we can solve in our equation. So we plug in x plus 3/8 squared equals, where's k? Over there. 57 over 64. Here's our equation, and now we can solve. We got it squared, so we square root. Now, yeah, it's easy peasy from here. Square root both sides, add a plus or minus. So we have x plus 3/8 equals plus or minus square root of 57 over square root of 64. I'm going to go ahead and write it this way just to give you a hint. Square root of 64 is 8. So we can reduce that to square root of 57 over 8. We subtract 3/8. The marker's going dead, sorry. To both sides, negative 3 over 8 equals x, and this would be your answer. Negative 3/8 plus or minus radical 57 over 8. That's the only example I'm going to do on this one because they're kind of time consuming, but I think you got the idea. So we're going to go ahead and cut 58, lesson 58 right there.